In today's video, how this has changed fat loss forever. Hey guys, what's going on? This is Paul Ravella from ProPhysique.com. In today's video, I'm going to do things a little bit differently, but I'm going to talk about a new approach to fat loss that has changed things forever, especially with me in regards to how I do things myself with my athletes. But also I think how we can perceive fat loss, because fat loss is obviously the focus for a lot of people, okay? Especially as obesity is on the rise, okay? And we can talk about that, but that's why that's happening. But I want to talk about fat loss and how actually fat loss might be making the obesity epidemic worse, because we don't actually understand how the human body works. But I'm going to try to help you guys understand that through, well, our Transformation Challenge Facebook group. This week, I'm going to be answering questions directly from them. So I'm going to put it on the screen here for you so you guys can hear what the question is. But would you mention the study that compared dieting for 16 weeks in a row versus dieting for 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off? I can't find the video you mentioned in it. Is it related to reverse dieting? Not sure. Any content on maintaining physique and increasing calories after dieting would be fantastic. So that's what we're going to talk about. I, as a coach competitors. In fact, hey, this last weekend, I had 3 competitors win overall titles, okay? The weekend before that, I had a competitor win a pro title. I know what I'm doing. I'm one of the best at coaching competitors. And so what I want to focus on is the fact that it's not just about losing body fat. Any idiot can starve someone and get them lean and give them an 800 calorie meal plan and lots of cardio. You're going to lose weight initially if you do that. However, the body adapts to that. What often happens is if you use a very bad approach to fat loss, well, you put body fat back on and it's very hard to get it off. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why, and why this study that they're referring to, the MATADOR study, which is actually a reference to a diet break, not a refeed, although it's probably technically a refeed strategy. But we're going to get into the details of that and why that has changed the coaching world in my mind. I don't have clients come off shows and put on a bunch of body fat. In fact, my clients stay leaner than they've ever stayed. And they're happier than they've ever been because I've learned to use this strategy throughout contest prep. Now, the MATADOR study was a very specific approach. They took obese men and they either did one of 2 things. They either put them through 16 weeks straight of dieting, right here. So these are the maintenance calories. They kept their calories below maintenance for 16 straight weeks. Now, this was a very well-controlled study, so it actually had some cool things. So after 16 weeks, guess what? They had lost a lot of body fat. Great. They also took a group of individuals and did the same thing, except one caveat. They did 16 weeks of fat loss, but intermittently did 2 weeks of recovery in between. So they would diet for 2 weeks on their lower calories, then they would bring their calories up to maintenance for 2 weeks, then they would bring them back down for 2 weeks. So it took a little longer, because obviously if you're at 16 weeks and you add 2 weeks to that every time, you get there a little bit slower, okay? But they found something interesting. Also, of note, maintenance calories are not static. So a lot of people think like, oh, these are my maintenance calories. So when they end their diet, they go right back. As you lose body fat, as you lose weight, your body adapts to that and you don't need as many calories. So it's not a bad thing, but yeah, you require less calories. And the nice thing that this study did, the MATADOR study, they actually accounted for that, much like I would do if I was coaching a competitor. If I'm going to bring their calories back up to maintenance for a week or 2 during the course of a dieting phase, it's not going to be back to their pre-diet maintenance calories here. It's going to be to their adapted maintenance calories. Probably sounds very complicated. It's not that complicated, but what we're talking about here is this study where they did this. So both groups lost a lot of body fat. The group that did it over 32 weeks lost more body fat. Both groups were able to lose body fat successfully. However, the group that did it over the longer period, they had less metabolic adaptation, they kept more muscle, and when they did the follow-up with these people months later, they had put on less body fat. They had been able to maintain a lower body weight, which ultimately what determines the success of a diet. If you see someone talking about, hey, I can lose 30 pounds in 10 days, I can do this fasting diet, I can do this keto diet, but it's not something that's sustainable for them, and they end up heavier. And I'm not saying those style of diets are bad. You know, for everybody, it's about behavior change and learning to adapt. But understanding that if you go through this process and give yourself a little bit of recovery from time to time, it's going to end up being a lot better. And this study showed that. And this was something that, you know, us in the fitness community probably had been doing for a little while, whether it was refeeds, whether it was, you know, taking a break in prep. The one thing I tended to notice was that my clients that did competitions would often get better between the competitions, and I think it was the break going into the competition when I would bring the cardio down, bring the food up. That's how I would typically use for a peaking approach for a contest prep competitor. But It was essentially a controlled diet break. Or instead of being in a deficit for that week, I would bring calories up. Now, do you need to take 2 weeks to recover? What are we talking about when we talk about recovery? So I want to talk about what happens to the body when we're dieting and why this is important. So it's very hard to lose body fat. I'm not discounting that, guys. We have to control our calories. We have to do cardio. We have to, whatever we have to do to create a caloric deficit, okay? We have to look at the big picture. What is our daily routine like? How much activity are we getting? How much calories are we taking in? Where is that margin for us to, create the deficit? If you want to eat more, well, you could probably just focus on moving more. If you don't have a lot of options for movement, you probably got to control your calories. Whenever someone says to me, oh, all you have to do, you don't have to do cardio, you can just eat less. Well, some people would prefer to eat 3,000 calories and do some cardio versus eating 1,000 calories and not moving all day, right? So there is a preference there. It comes down to creating that deficit. Ultimately, how you create that deficit, it's going to be defined, the success of it, by if you are actually, in fact, creating a deficit. So what I want to focus on is what happens when we do this, when we start to restrict calories, okay? Stress can go up, hunger can increase, okay? Sometimes sleep can be interrupted. Ultimately, all those factors are going to have an impact on our hormones, our stress hormones, our sex hormones, right? We're restricting calories. We're not getting the nutrients we need. Sometimes low-fat diets can lead to poor hormone production. If people don't actually know what they're doing and they're just restricting calories and not paying attention to their macronutrient ratios and what they need to get in to be healthy and be successful, well, they just end up in a worse place than they started. This is where we can see some extreme rebounds, guys. That's why when you see people talking about crash dieting, I know a lot was made of The Biggest Loser years ago, where they would crash diet, have them do tons of activity, and it wouldn't be sustainable. And after the show would end, what would happen? Well, they would put all the body fat back on and more. It's not an uncommon thing. In research, they call it body fat overshooting. We've seen it. I've seen it with competitors in the past. However, I don't see it anymore, and here's why. When you come up to your predicted maintenance throughout the phase of a diet for a week, for 2 weeks, sometimes I just do it with my competitors for 2, 3, 4 days at a time. You reset all this. You start to get better sleep. You start to be a little bit less hungry. Okay, your sleep will improve, your hormones will improve, your energy will pick up. So when I say to you that you can bring the calories up and drop the cardio down and continue to drop weight, it's because we're starting to re-kick off some of those systems that become a little bit dormant when we're focused solely on fat loss. It's very difficult to lose fat. Now, why did I say that before? Because it is. There are going to be times where you have to restrict calories, you have to deal with hunger, you have to be more active than you would want to be to get the body fat to come off, especially if you have physique goals, like a competition goal. But if you're just an obese male, like was in this MATADOR study, body fat's probably going to come off a little easier for you, right? For women, it can often be a little bit more difficult. We're all dealing with individual situations, but it all comes down to the difficulty of losing body fat. It is difficult. However, it is not difficult to stay lean, okay? Once the body fat is off, you can slowly bring the food back up, you can bring it up to your predicted maintenance, and you can bring your cardio down. What I typically do with a competitor or with an athlete of mine that's taking a recovery week or a diet break week, and I do this with all my competitors that diet down for shows, I'll bring their calories up, okay, maybe 30, 40, 50%. Let's say I have a typical competitor on, let's say 130 protein, 120 carb, and 45 fat. A diet break for that person would probably still be 130 protein. Instead of 120 carb, would probably be 170 to 180 carb. Instead of 45 fat, probably 55 fat. If they're doing 60 minutes of cardio 5 days a week, I'm gonna bring that down to 30 minutes of cardio 5 days a week. And what's gonna happen? Well, hopefully, they start to drop some weight, they start to sleep a little bit better, they get these energy systems start to kick in, and I get to actually continue to feed them. Worst case scenario, we're gonna maintain our weight, we're gonna recover and feel better, and then we can go back into our deficit. It all comes down to the situation, but this MATADOR study that you guys are referring to in the private Facebook group, that's what this was about. This was about looking at, instead of linear fat loss, meaning you just focus on fat loss for 16 weeks, which is a long time, that's 4 months. Our transformation challenge is only 12 weeks. That's 90 days. They did it for actually another full month, 120 days. When you do that, these adaptations become very difficult. You become very food focused. Your hormones can become very suppressed. Your sleep can be an issue, right? And as soon as you take away the throttle of going, okay, the fat loss phase is over, and if you're doing a typical crash diet where you go, okay, the crash diet's over, I've reached my goal weight, I went on my vacation, we can have some problems. So by taking these bits of recovery throughout the process, you bring your energy systems back to normal. You get better sleep. You're able to focus again. And after that 2 weeks, you know, okay, I can kick this off. That way, when you reach your endpoint, when you reach that condition, for me and for my competitors, it's shredded physiques that get on stage and hopefully do multiple shows. We're gonna try to go compete at the next level and the next level. If you take care of yourself, when you get there, you don't feel run down, you don't feel food focused, and it just feels like another week, another day. Yes, when you have ultra low body fat like a competitor, perhaps you might have an issue. But for these men that were obese, just coming down to a normal BMI, they were able to maintain that, maintain a better metabolism, maintain more muscle, okay? And keep the weight off, because ultimately, if you're crashing for 16 weeks straight and you hit your weight goal, great. But if you end up at the same weight a few months later or even more, that was an unsuccessful diet. And when we talk about obesity, there is a statistic that shows a correlation between how obese people are and how many times they've tried to diet. Now, obviously, if you're overweight, you're going to try to diet, but if you're dieting the wrong way, you can only make your situation worse, okay? If you're dieting properly, pushing to get leaner, and then focus on maintenance and feeling good again before you make that next push, well, I think that this is a game changer for the way that we look at fat loss. Now, I would always focus on momentum. So for me, do I think everybody should do 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off? Absolutely not. If you're on a 2-week fat loss phase and you're down several pounds and things are humming, you feel good, keep going. When do I use diet breaks? Certainly not every 2 weeks, okay? Through the course of an 18 to 20 week prep, I might use them 2 or 3 times for a week at a time, right? And it's going to happen when I realize that, okay, I'm pushing this person harder, we've increased the cardio, we've decreased the calories, they're not seeing progress, they're feeling run down, sleep is disturbed, hunger is high, it's time for a recovery week. And 100 times out of 100, after that recovery week, they are able to successfully lose weight again. And sometimes they'll even lose weight during the recovery week. And the reason why? Well, I told you, they're getting better sleep. Their NEAT might increase. So even though it looks like on paper they're eating more and doing less cardio, they're actually creating more of a deficit because their body is happier, okay? Their body is allowing them to lose body fat. You can get into, in this type of diet, a chronic state of stress where you are just always run down and you're always playing catch up and your body just starts to hold on to that through inflammation, okay? Chronic inflammation. And it will hold on to body fat, okay? When the body's happy, it will respond. And if you give it breaks throughout the process, so if you are hitting a sticking point, if you have hit a plateau in your dieting phase, it's probably a good idea to think about bringing calories up slightly, bringing cardio down slightly, giving yourself a week of grace. Now, a diet break does not mean a break from dieting. If you are dieting phase and you just go off the rails, you can just put on body fat, right? Go back, right back to where you were. You can set yourself back several weeks. It needs to be managed and controlled, okay? You guys need to pay attention to what you're eating and don't think of it as a break from the process, okay? Like I said, it's easy to keep fat off, but it's also easy to put fat right back on. It's very hard to lose body fat, guys. This process is difficult, okay? But if you just focus on learning the steps to get there, it's a lot easier to maintain than it was to obtain. That's the phrase for the day. All right, guys, I'll talk to you soon.